Welcome to Moonside Lake, episode 2. In this episode, we will deal with the exact opposite of the previous one, meaning a build at blood level 100, but that draws its scaling from everything but arcane. I call that the QUALITINGE build because I have a dodgy sense of humor and I'm very bad at wordplay. But that's essentially using quality weapons and blood tinge together. So the whole idea is to reach the first breakpoint in strength, skill, and blood tinge to take advantage of the partially good scaling of all the different weapons in question, rather than trying to go for just a single build with weapons that scale very well on, say, only skill or only strength. So the build today is dealing with the spears. The rifle spear, the piercing rifle, and the soul spear. This build is blood level 100, and as you can see, I have basically the stats distributed so that I have 13 strength, 25 in skill, and 25 in blood tinge, then 22 in endurance because I like this breakpoint. That's the point where after 23 and 24 the increase in stamina is really weak, so it's the best sort of mid-level to stop in endurance for a build that is not heavily reliant on endurance. And vitality of 42 because, well, basically that's enough if you're not doing PvP, even if you are actually, but anyway. So the reason why I do that is mostly for this weapon here, the rifle spear. The rifle spear scales D in strength and B in skill, but also B in blood tinge. Ignore the C scaling in arcane. It's only if you convert weapons, and this weapon is actually not convertible, so it's basically a remnant of probably early versions of the game that is clearly not really finished. Anyway, the rifle spear with D and B scalings it falls into this category of quality weapon, really, where you get a better bang for your bucks when you level both strength and skill to the first breakpoint, which means 25, rather than going all the way up in one of those. Typically, if you keep your strength at 10 and go with your rifle spear all the way up to 50 in skill, you will have a few more, a little bit more AR to your rifle spear than if you stick to 25 strength, 25 dexterity. But it will cost you 10 more levels, because in order to go to 25 in strength, you need only 15 more points. Whereas if you want to go all the way to 50, you will need 25 more points, so basically 10 more points than what you need to go to 25 strength. So for not massive benefit, except for the visceral damage that are much higher with 15 skill, because the viscerals, as you know, scale on skill, as well as on the physical damage gems that you have equipped on your weapon. But the idea is that this weapon scales allows you to basically get a very good benefit from only 25 strength and skill, and also 25 in blood tinge, because the damage in blood tinge scales rather well up to 25, and then past 25 not so much. The other weapon that I want to feature on this build is the soul spear. That is basically the best weapon, if not the best, one of the top tier weapons in the game anyway, both in PvP and PvE. This weapon is super quick, costs very little stamina. Transform mode is still one-handed, which is great when you have a little bit of blood tinge, so that you can still benefit from your offhand weapon and shoot whenever you want it without spoiling the bone marrow ash that you buffed your firearm with. Has a very good moveset with transformation attacks that are awesome. Also scales D in strength and C in dexterity. As you can see, if you compare the two, you can see that the D in the saw spear is blue, meaning it scales a little bit better than the rifle spear. Despite the fact that both share the same letter, there are certain grades in the same category of scaling, so the blue D is better than the white D in this case. But that's very negligible. The C scaling is worse than the B scaling, obviously, on the rifle spear, but starting, quite frankly, with a better D scaling in strength, it comes back to a very similar sort of scaling on both of those attributes together. So 25-25 in both is ideal for those weapons. Of course, you can go further, and if you had to pick one stat to increase further than 25, you would first go for skill in this case before going for strength. So why, you may ask, did I go for 30 strength? Well, because since I already have 25 in blood tinge, and I'm already at 25 in strength, I may as well push it a little bit further by a few points so that I can use this baby here, the canon. And the canon, without any investment in blood tinge, is not that great. But once you start investing in blood tinge, up to 25, I would not invest further than 25 for this, but that's debatable. But when you have 25 in blood tinge, you can see that you have a plus 120 AR to your original 600 AR. So 720, when you buff it, you hit for a solid 1000 points of damage. That starts to pack some serious punch. The other weapon that you might want to consider, that I have not used on this build, but that is also very good, especially well, as long as you have 28 strength and whatever your level of blood tinge is, the higher the better, obviously, but even with default level of blood tinge it works. It's the Gatling gun, and the Gatling gun is really good, but I will show it in another build that has 28 in strength to use it, but has no blood tinge, and you will see it works just fine. But the cannon with blood tinge packs some punch. Okay, so in terms of caryll runes classic, I have used an up visceral attack 30% for my third one instead of a boost 10% HP or a 5% all damage reduction, but it's just that this build tends to land a lot of visceral thanks to the rifle spear, and I will come to that in a minute. Let's start with what is the best thing to do with this build. Like, out of all the movesets that you have to use, if you had to pick one moveset for each of those weapons, is for the rifle spear, transform mode, charge R2. That's the best. And the second is the L2 in transform mode. For the saw spear, the best is the transformation attack. This is beastly, very efficient. Then for the rest, we will see that it's a spam happy weapon, but it mostly benefits from a little bit more restraint and understanding of the mechanics of the game, because you do not do as much damage when you do that than when you do that, for example. Because the transformation attack not only hit harder, built more beasthood, trigger more stagger, but cost about the same stamina. So basically it's a no-brainer. It's a better attack. If you are purely about DPS, that is the best you can do. But the truth is that a mix of both with the added modification the modifier on the attack rating on the transformation attack is so much better than you deal really a lot more damage with that. Okay, so let's delve into the moveset of the Soul Spear to start with. So the Soul Spear starts folded by default in non-transform mode. It's a very spammy, happy R1, and each R1, successive R1, has a higher modifier as you go. So it's basically encouraging you to spam. But as I said, it's better to, in the end, just use combinations like this than just spam R1. The R2 is unnoticeable. But the charged R2 is very good because it's very quick and it has an angle that allows you to basically land a visceral attack very easily with it. The running attack is quite boring. The running R2 is okay. When you transform your weapon, it becomes a spear, hence the name. The R1 is kind of annoying, but allows you to deal with crowds a bit more efficiently. So that's one vertical, then the other side, then and vertical, and the other side. But what is really good is the R2. The R2 on this one has a lot of reach, is a thrust attack, which allows you to actually use this weapon against beast because it's serrated. That's its first strength, is that it's serrated in both modes. But it has a few thrust attacks, like for example the running R1 is a thrust as well on this mode, and the R2 is a thrust, and that deals a lot of damage to kin. So if you had to just do a weapon that does it all, the Soul Spear has it. The Soul Spear can do it. It is serrated on both sides of the weapon, so it deals serration damage in either form. But the real strength is this. Just keep that in mind. The transformation attack is god tier. How did I slot it? I have those very funky 20% plus physical up at full HP that gives me basically 330% gems on full HP. That cannot be beaten in PvE. When you are hit, so even if you miss 1 HP, you drop and ignore the bonus at full HP. So you end up with basically just 20% gems, which is less than ideal, but still deals a very decent amount of damage. I would say that in PvE in general, once you know how to play the game well enough, it's the best sort of setup that you can think of. Notice that it's all with negative effect against the kin, because I do not intend to use this weapon ever against a kin adversary. This is meant for decimating beasts only. Beasts are destroyed by it because of the serration. It is buffable, so I strongly suggest you throw a fire paper on top of it and then you go to town. I personally, for a boss, I always use a beast blood pellet as well, because that increases your damage that are fully physical and make it go through the roof very quickly. And by the way, when you use the transformation attack, the amount of beasthood that you built with the transformation attack is way higher than the normal R1. With that out of the way, if I have to deal with keen adversaries, that's what I would use. The rifle spear is slotted. I'll come back to the slot later. The rifle spear is mostly thrust in untransformed mode. R1 is thrust, R2 is thrust, but just slightly wider preparation and slightly longer reach. Running attack, R1 is thrust. Only the running R2 is not. The rolling R2 is this sort of weird swing that is actually very reminiscent of the transformed rolling R1 of the Soul Spear. The Soul Spear has also a very quick rolling R1 out of rolls. It's pretty good, but has very little reach. But it's very good when you're in your face and ready to go to town on an opponent. Now, this has to be used much more cautiously. The Soul Spear is all about getting in, just raining death on your opponent, and then getting out before getting hit. The staggers help with controlling the hits. Now, the rifle spear will not allow you to do the same thing. The hits are not fast enough to be very comfortable in controlling your opponent by staggering it. Yeah, it's not that fast. And the worst is when it's transformed. When it's transformed, the R1 becomes those swings that look fast. They're not. Trust me, they're not. They actually feel like they take forever when you have an enemy in front of you before it connects. But what is really good is you have the rolling poke that is extremely useful. The R2 is amazing. It's slow, but it hits like a truck. But what is really good is this. The charged R2 is dealing a lot of damage, has a massive amount of hyper armor. So you tear through groups by just running away, then you charge your attack and you come back towards them, and you just go through the whole pack. And obviously, in transform mode, you shoot bullets. Keep in mind that your bullets scale on Bloodtinge, obviously, but they do not behave exactly like the shotguns. If you take, for example, the shotgun and you shoot your bullets with it, you will see that the spray is very similar, okay? But the calculation damage on the shotgun is so that if you add flat damage to your shotgun, each pellet in the shot gets the flat damage added to it. It was also historically the case for the Lost Rifle, the rifle spear, but they nerfed it because there were so many abuses, because you could actually add flat arcane damage to it, which means that each pellet would have plus 210 arcane damage to it, which make it obviously completely broken. So they fixed it years ago, and now you basically have a pellet load, but each pellet still inflicts its own portion of the total damage, but they do not receive individual flat damage bonus. So keep that in mind. It basically behaves like a gun does, but with just a fraction of the number of pellets hitting, dealing the fraction of the total damage. So it deals on the paper very high damage, but it actually delivers all this damage only when all the pellets connect. Whereas on the Hunter Blunderbuss, for example, it's not dealing only 37 plus 36. It's dealing that multiplied by, I don't know, I think it's 10 or 12 pellets, I don't remember. So yeah, much more than this. But then again, so you can, in theory, do more damage more easily with a blunderbuss than you do with the rifle spear shots. A quick word on the gems that I have equipped on the rifle spear. Normally the rifle spear by default, the default imprint is 2 radials and 1 triangle, which basically calls for either the classic 227.2% or several variations, like for example an abyssal 24.8 plus attack versus open foe, or plus 15 points of damage, etc. Usually 27.2% will give you a very good output. It just turns out that since I dropped at one point, I dropped this waning gem 21% plus 12. That is just too good to pass for PvE especially. So I decided to basically go for the lost version of the rifle spear in order to integrate this into my rifle spear. Why in my rifle spear? Because this gem came with an attack versus beast down malus, so I can't put it on my soul spear that is dedicated to beasts, so I have no problem putting it on my rifle spear that is dedicated to kin though. So that makes it a good match for example, the uncanny version of the rifle spear with 2 radial and a waning, or the lost version. Why did I choose the lost version? Because I also had the 27.2 triangle that you see equipped here, so that's why I just went for it. Then in order to complement it, I decided to go for the abyssal, and I farmed the bloodletting beast for an abyssal 24.8%. The fact that it has a plus 5.6% against open foe is actually quite useful on the rifle spear, because this is a weapon that will usually, when you shoot at the target, you end up shooting with the timing of the shot. You end up interrupting, which means added bonus on open foe activated before then triggering an opening for visceral. So it's kind of a win-win situation where you basically have the 5.6% that ticks when you shoot. The thing is, you lose probably 12% at full HP in the process because you've been hit, but you recover it for the visceral straight up, because as soon as you start the visceral, all your life is recovered. So yeah, it's 27.2% is absolutely valid for the 3 slots, just so you know. And last but not least, the piercing rifle. So the piercing rifle is a mix between a shotgun and a gun, really. It has the slow shot animation and recovery from a shotgun, but has the focused and long range of a gun. I mean, long range. It's all relative, because firearms in Bloodborne have a horrendously short range. Yeah. So the benefit from this is that first it scales really well on Bloodtinge. So it's one of those weapons that on the paper deal as much damage as, say, the Evelyn would do, except it shoots much more slowly and it's much longer to recover from it. But it has an advantage, is that each shot actually shoots through whatever enemy there is on the way. So if you have 4 enemies aligned, all 4 will get damaged by the one shot. So you have to use that to your advantage. And it also causes way more stagger than a normal gunshot. And finally, the cannon, that is here to... The way I use it is usually I put a BMA on, and I shoot on the ground at the bottom, either at my own feet or at the bottom of whatever opponent is in the middle of a pack to try to maximize the area of effect damage. Or you can use that to deal very high damage instantaneously to a susceptible part of a boss to try to accelerate the breakdown and opening for a visceral, breaking a limb or something like that. So do not expect miracles from the cannon though, because despite the fact it uses 12 bullets, which is huge, it does actually fairly low damage. Like basically, if you were to shoot 2 bullets with BMA on the rifle spear, you would do more damage than 1 shot with a BMA on the cannon on the same opponent. So just keep that in mind. It's not a magical solution to your problems either, but it's a very good crowd control and a good burst in damage during a boss fight mostly. And also in PvP, I mean, obviously if you shoot someone or you shoot on the ground, in PvP usually if you're clever and you hide it, you use a quick swap on your cannon with latency and the horrendous Bloodborne netcode, the chances are you will probably win the fight with just 1 shot of the cannon anyway. Yeah, that's pretty much it for my QUALITINGE builds, really. The tools I'm using are basically the classic ones. So I'm using the pungent cocktail to mass accumulate and freeze packs of beasts together, usually the shaman bow blade, to just have fun and turn some enemies against each other. The Murderous Whistle is more of a crowd control tool. On a full blood tinge build, it's really useful because at 50 blood tinge you deal massive amount of damage. On this one, I just use it to deal with the very few enemies in the game that are very resistant to both blood tinge and physical damage, because the Murderous Whistle, as everybody should know by now, is dealing arcane damage despite the fact that it scales on blood tinge. So when you use the Murderous Whistle, just so you know, you can just walk quietly out of it without ever being hit. You don't have to roll. Now you can do, well, I have a Murderous Whistle guide if you are interested on my channel, but yeah, just basically you can just do a reverse backstep out of it and then come back and charge on whatever enemy is thrown up in the air to deal massive damage. But that's sort of complicated for not just for the fun of it. It's not adding much to the actual results than just spamming your R1 really, but it exists. Now the Molotov cocktails are just to deal some fire damage, to do some crowd control, and also because it's not easy to land the Murderous Whistle except on some of the blobs. I don't remember how they're called, the blood blobs or something like that. Those are that basically why I use them. I use Murderous on them usually, but the scorpions don't like the rope Molotov, so you just drop that on the face of the scorpions, because otherwise just hitting will take like 5 hits at least. Anyway, and the throwing knife as just a method of pooling and maintaining pressure without having to shoot with the rifle. If you are on the cannon, basically you have your BMA that is ready to shoot on the cannon. You want to put some pressure or pull an enemy. That's what I use it for. In my personal effects, I have the bone marrow ash. It's an absolute must. The fire paper or bolt paper, depending on the enemy. Kin bolt paper, beast fire paper, pretty much. the beast blood pellet to boost your damage, and then the defensive stuff. And here this is just to show where you go in a chalice dungeon, to let people know where you are at. Well, with that, I hope that you learned something. I will put now a few clips of the build in action in different dungeons, cooperation, solo, etc. If you have any questions, shoot them in the comments down below, and see you next time. Okay, so example of the rifle spear fun thingy. Those guys are actually perfect. You align them and you enjoy. But that's pretty much it. I mean, it would be better if the rifle spear benefited from stronger damage, really, but also stronger buff by the BMA. But it does not. It does not benefit from the same buff as the guns do. The guns have their damage multiplied by almost 3. This is just basically doubled, but that's it. Now, the cannon against those guys, what does it do? Some of them are dead. The one that got hit by the full explosion got hit really hard and died on the without additional hits. But most of them that were just in the close core of the explosion were not dead, despite the fact that I use a BMA and I have 25 in Bloodtinge. And that's where you see how bad the cannon is without any investment in Bloodtinge, because it's already borderline crap for 12 bullets. 12 bullets and still struggling like this. Man, without Bloodtinge, I never use the cannon, because it's really not worth it. With 25 it starts being worth it. Obviously with 50 it would be better, but hey, look, at 50 you have plus 200, so 80 more damage out of 720, out of a total of 800 points of damage. You add another 10% damage with 25 more levels invested in Bloodtinge. Is it worth it? Well, you tell me. I tell you, no, it's not. Because you know what? With 10% more damage, the group that I just shot here, there won't be any more dead with the blast than they were now. There will be a slightly more worn out, but they will still be up on their feet. So the church cannon, if you have 50 in Bloodtinge, you need to use the church cannon, not the proper cannon, because it shoots a larger area of effect, bigger damage and bigger splash damage, and recovers faster, is much more, it's actually more enjoyable and less frustrating to use. Anyway, with that out of the way, that was it for the booms and the spear against kin. Well, let's see. So before a boss, you go like this, like that, like this. And oh yes, Dogo. So in your bottom. fucked up big time. I knew it. I was like, I did not go as far as I thought I would go. I thought he would go. He would not correct his trajectory as much as he did. No, anyway. Okay, well, that's a life fuck up. That's what it is. Okay. No. Okay, that's 3 million 3 million souls lost right there. Yay! Ah well. Quite frankly, at this point, I really did not know what to do with all those because I don't intend to level up this character any further than 100 anyway, so... Oh shit. Anyway. Okay, let's just use that. Alright. Whoa, he's fast. He's pissed off. Boom! I will give you reasons to be pissed off. Ah! What the fuck? Alright. Anyway. Voilà.